Hi and welcome back to my channel. I'm Kim and in today's video we are going to learn how to use possessive suffixes in Finnish. First we're going to start with a short introduction, what are possessive suffixes and how to use them in formal Finnish and in standard Finnish. Then we are going to move on to the grammar points, which means we are going to learn when to not use possessive suffixes, where to add possessive suffixes in a word, how to use possessive suffixes after specific endings, and when we can replace the third person's possessive suffix, which is ensa or ensa, with vowel n. Later on we will also learn how to use possessive suffixes in specific structures. For example, we'll look at sentences that do consist of itse plus possessive suffixes, toinen plus possessive suffixes, and we are also going to learn how to use postpositions with possessive suffixes. Later on we will also focus on a very important topic, how to form the possessive suffixes. Here we have more than 13 rules. Then when we are closer to the end, we are also going to learn how to use possessive suffixes in spoken Finnish and in colloquial Finnish. After this we are also going through some examples, and at the very end of this video we will as always practice what we've learned today by solving some exercises together. So let's start with our first chapter. What are possessive suffixes? We use possessive suffixes in order to indicate possession. For example, when we want to say my car, then we say minun autoni. Minun is a personal pronoun standing in the genitive and its basic form is minä. Autoni means my car. It's a combination of the word auto, which means car, plus the possessive suffix ni, which is used for the first person singular. So minun autoni means my car. Now, there are different ways how we can use possessive suffixes. We can either use them alongside personal pronouns in the genitive case, for example, minun autoni, or as a substitute for them. For example, we can also just say autoni. Also important to know is that each person has its own possessive suffix. For example, my car is minun autoni, your car is sinun autosi, or for example, our car is meidän automme. So as you see here, the possessive suffixes do change depending on the person. However, the third person singular and plural share the same suffix. For example, hänen autonsa, which means his or her car, and heidän autonsa, which means their car. In both examples here, we have the same suffix, which is ensa. Now, for better understanding, let's take a look at one example. My car in Finnish is minun autoni. Your car is sinun autosi. His or her car is hänen autonsa. Our car is meidän automme. Your car, plural, is teidän autonne. And their car, third person plural, is heidän autonsa. So these examples here show that in order to express possession, we use a combination of a personal pronoun in the genitive case, which is here minun, sinun, hänen, meidän, teidän, and heidän, plus a possessive suffix, which is here ni, si, ensa, me, ne, and again ensa. Remember, third person singular and third person plural do share the same suffix. But now there might appear one question. Is it really necessary to indicate possession twice? So do we really have to say minun autoni, or would it be also enough to just say autoni? The answer is yes. Let's take a closer look. So here on your left side you see the formal Finnish version, which is the version we just went through, and on your right side you see the standard Finnish version. The difference between them is that the formal Finnish version combines the genitive personal pronouns with the possessive suffixes. This form is usually used in official texts or letters. Then again on your right side you see the standard Finnish version, which is especially often used on television or newspapers. This version only uses possessive suffixes. Now let's go quickly through it. Minun autoni, my car, is in standard Finnish autoni. Sinun autosi, your car, becomes autosi. Hänen autonsa, his or her car, stays the same. Meidän automme, our car, becomes just automme. Teidän autonne, your car, plural, changes to just autonne. and heidän autonsa, their car, stays the same. Now, let's take again a look at the third person singular and plural forms. As mentioned before, hänen autonsa and heidän autonsa do remain the same in both formal and standard Finnish. While in standard Finnish we can omit the personal pronouns like minun, sinun, meidän or teidän, the third person pronouns hänen and heidän need to still be explicitly stated. Why? Because the third person possessive suffix ensa or ensa, depending on the vowel harmony, is the same for both singular and plural, and without the pronoun it would be unclear whether the possession is singular or plural. So to sum it up, the formal Finnish version uses both the pronoun and the suffix, for example minun autoni, while in standard Finnish we often rely just on the possessive suffix alone, which is why we say autoni. Then there's also the spoken and colloquial version, but this we're going to discuss later in the video. Now let's move on to the actual grammar points. Our first one is when to not use the possessive suffix. So we don't use the possessive suffix with proper names or nouns. Let's take a look at one example. When we want to say his TV is broken, then we can say hänen televisionsa on rikki, means his or her television is broken. But if the hänen is instead an actual name, like for example Mikko or Jonas, then we don't use the possessive suffix. Instead we say Mikon televisio on rikki. Mikko's television is broken. So Mikon here is the genitive case of Mikko. The double K changes to 1K, consonant gradation. Televisio means television. On is, it's the third person singular present tense of the verb olla, which means to be, and rikki means broken. So here it's important to remember that because of the proper name, which is Mikko here, we do not add a possessive suffix to televisio. So let's repeat again. Mikon televisio on rikki. Mikko's television is broken. Let's have one more example. We want to say the television of the woman is broken. Woman in Finnish is nainen. So to say it correctly in Finnish, we say naisen televisio on rikki. Naisen is the genitive case of nainen. Also here we cannot add a possessive suffix to televisio because nainen is our proper noun. So let's repeat. Naisen televisio on rikki. The television of the woman is broken. Then we also do not use possessive suffixes with adjectives or numbers. Let's see what it means. For example, tämä on minun vanha tulostimeni means this is my old printer. Here in this sentence, vanha is our adjective, which means we do not add any possessive suffix to it. So here we cannot say vanhani. Let's repeat. Tämä on minun vanha tulostimeni. This is my old printer. Tämä means this, on is, minun, my, vanha, old, it's an adjective, and tulostimeni means my printer. It's a combination of the word tulostin, which means printer, plus the possessive suffix ni. By the way, if you are wondering why we say tulostimeni, it's because the possessive suffix ni gets added to the stem of the word. The stem of tulostin is tulostima, so that's why we say tulostimeni. Tämä on minun vanha tulostimeni. Let's have another example. Uudessa talossani on hissi means in my new house there is an elevator. So uudessa here is the indecisive case of the adjective uusi, which means new. So that means we are not going to add any possessive suffix to it. So we cannot say uudessani here. Let's repeat. Uudessa talossani on hissi. Talossani, by the way, means in my house. Talossani is a combination of the word talo plus the indecisive marker sa plus the possessive suffix ni. Uudessa talossani, in my new house, on hissi is an elevator. Hissi is elevator. In my new house, there's an elevator. And also as mentioned, we also do not use possessive suffixes with numbers. For example, minun kolme kissani means my 3 cats. Minun, my, kolme, 3. Kissani means my cats. So since we have here a number, which is kolme, we do not add any possessive suffix to it. Why do we have two A's in kissani? Because here we have the partitive case of kissa, which means cat, plus the possessive suffix ni. Why do we have here the partitive case? Because of kolme. Remember, after numbers we use the partitive case. Alright, so let's quickly repeat. Tämä on minun vanha tulostimeni. This is my old printer. Uudessa talossani on hissi. In my new house there's an elevator. And minun 3 kissani, my 3 cats. We carry on with the next chapter, the word structure. Here we are going to discuss where in a word do we have to add the possessive suffixes to. The structure is pretty simple. It's the stem of a word plus the case marker plus possessive suffix. So in other words, it means the possessive suffix is always added after the case ending. Let's take a look at some examples. When we want to say in our school, then it's koulussamme. So koulu means school. Sa is the marker of the inessive case. And me here is our possessive suffix of the first person plural. So again, in our school is koulussamme. Let's take another example. With your car in Finnish is autolasi. So this one is a combination of the word auto, which means car. Then we have la, which is the marker of the adjective case, and si is the possessive suffix for the second person singular. So autolasi means with your car. If you already know the adjective case, then you know it's also used when we're talking about means of transportation. So autola, for example, means in Finnish by car, or bussilla means by bus. So here when we say autolasi, then we mean with your car. So as you see, the possessive suffix here is added after the adjective case ending. We carry on with our next chapter, the possessive suffix after specific endings. So when we have a word that has the genitive ending n, the nominative plural ending t, or an illative ending, then we have to remove this ending before we add a possessive suffix. Let's take a look at one example. My friend in Finnish is ystäväni. It's a combination of ystävä, which means friend, plus ni, which is the possessive suffix. Ystäväni, my friend. But now when I want to say my friends, then it looks a bit different. Friends in Finnish is ystävät. It's the nominative plural. Why do we use the nominative plural? Because here in my example, we want to talk about a specific amount of friends. And when I want to say my friends, then we also need the possessive suffix ni. Now the thing here is that when we want to put ystävät and ni together into one word, then we have to drop the T. That means my friends in Finnish is also ystäväni. Let's take a look at two examples. Ystäväni on kotoisin Japanista. And ystäväni ovat kotoisin Japanista. So here we have in both sentences ystäväni. In the first sentence, ystäväni means my friend. My friend is from Japan. And in the second sentence, we also have ystäväni, but here it means my friends. Why does it look the same? The ystäväni from the first sentence is a combination of ystävä plus ni, which means my friend. And when we look to the ystäväni from the second sentence, then we see that it's actually a combination of ystävät plus ni, just that the nominative plural marker t got removed before we added the possessive suffix ni. Now, how do we know if we're talking about just one friend of mine or more? As we know, ystäväni can mean my friend or also my friends. Here it's actually the verb in the sentence that indicates whether we are referring to a single friend or to more friends. So when we look at the ystäväni on versus the ystäväni ovat, then we see that it's actually the verb olla that tells us which one is meant. So, ystäväni on kotoisin Japanista means my friend is from Japan, and ystäväni ovat kotoisin Japanista means my friends are from Japan. Alright, we carry on to the next topic, ensa versus vowel n. So the possessive suffix ensa or ensa for the third person singular and plural can be also sometimes replaced with the suffix vowel n. This suffix can be used for almost all cases except the nominative and all cases that end in a consonant. These are the genitive case, illative case, and T plural. Also important to mention is that the suffix vowel n can also be used in the partitive case as long as it is not preceded by a long vowel. A long vowel, by the way, is a vowel that consists of two same vowels. For example, when we take a look at the word talo, which means house, the partitive case of talo is taloa, so that means we can say taloansa or taloan. So the possessive ending ensa for the third person singular can be also replaced with the suffix vowel n. However, this doesn't work for the word kissa, which means cat. The partitive case of kissa is kissa with a double A, so here we can only use the form kissansa. So, in other words, the possessive suffix ensa for this example cannot be replaced with the other suffix vowel n. Why? Because we want to avoid 3 A's in a row. For better understanding, let's take a look at one example. Here we have the word talo, which means house. Let's see when we can add both possessive suffixes, like the ensa, ense, or the vowel n alternative, and when we can only use the ensa or ense form. So talo is already standing in the nominative case. Here we can only say talonsa. Genitive case is talon. Also here we can only say talonsa. The illative case is talon. Also here we can only say talonsa. The essive case is talona. Here we can use both versions. We can either say talonansa or talonan. Why can we use here both versions? First, because of the rules, and because talona is ending in a short vowel. Next one, partitive case, is taloa. Also here we can say taloansa or taloan. Why? Because taloa does not end in two same vowels. Next one, in a essive case, is talosa. Here we can say talosansa or talosan. The elative case is talosta. Here we can say talostansa or talostan. Allative case, talolle. Here we can also use both versions, talolensa or talolen. Ablative case, talolta. Here we can also use both versions, taloltansa or taloltan. Adhesive case, talolla, also ending in a short vowel. That means here we can also say talolansa or talolan. And our last one, transitive case, taloxi, which also ends in a short vowel. So that means we can also replace here the third person's possessive suffix ensa with the other form, vowel n. So that means we can say taloxensa or taloxen. Alright, so this hopefully helped understanding when the possessive suffix ensa or ensa for the third person singular and plural can be replaced with the suffix vowel n. Now let's take a look at two examples. When we want to say he is in his house, then we can either say hen on talosansa or hen on talosan. Here we can replace the possessive suffix ensa with the suffix vowel n because talosa, which is the inessive case of talo, ends in a short vowel. Let's take another example. Hen rakasta vain kissansa means he only loves his cat. Here we can only use one form, the ensa form, so that means we cannot replace it with the suffix vowel n. Why? Because here we have the partitive case. Kissa in its partitive case does end in a long vowel, and when we have a word ending in a long vowel, then we cannot use the alternative suffix vowel n. Why do we use here the partitive case, by the way? Because of the verb rakasta. Rakasta, which means to love, is a partitive verb. So let's repeat. Hen on talosansa or hen on talosan, or hen rakasta vain kissansa. He only loves his cat. Nice. Now let's move on to our next topic, itse plus possessive suffix. So itse in English means self, and it gets used when we are doing something to ourselves. It often appears with a possessive suffix. So for example, itseni in English means myself, or itsesi means yourself. Now let's go through all the forms. Itseni means myself. For example, minä kuivaan itseni. I dry myself. Itsesi means yourself. For example, sinä kuivaat itsesi. you try yourself. Itsense means himself or herself. For example, hen kuivaa itsensä. He or she dries him or herself. Itsemme means ourselves. For example, me kuivaamme itsemme. We dry ourselves. Itsenne means yourselves. For example, te kuivaatte itsenne. You dry yourselves. And again, itsense. For example, he kuivaavat itsensä. Alright, now itse can also appear in different cases while getting attached to a possessive suffix. So here's actually the word structure, itse plus case marker plus possessive suffix. For example, pohdin asia itsekseni means I will consider the matter by myself. So itsekseni is actually a combination of itse plus xe. The translative marker is actually xi, but when we want to add something to it, then the I changes to an E. That's why we say xe, and ni is the possessive suffix. So that's why we say itsekseni. Pohdin asia itsekseni. I will consider the matter by myself. Let's take one more example. Sinä rakastat vain itseäsi. You only love yourself. And when we take a look here at itseäsi, then we clearly know it's the partitive case plus possessive suffix. Sinä rakastat vain itseäsi. You only love yourself. Why partitive case? Again, because of the verb rakastaa, which means to love. Alright, we carry on. Toinen plus possessive suffix. How can we use toinen plus a possessive suffix? Toinen is a reciprocal pronoun and it's the equivalent of the English each other or one another. It refers either to two or more people, which means that we have to use the plural forms. To make it easier, let's take a look at one example. Rakastamme toisiamme means we love each other. So rakastamme is the first person plural present tense of rakasta, which means to love, and toisiamme is the partitive plural of toinen plus the possessive suffix me. Why do we need here the partitive plural? Because loving each other is an action that happens between two people, so that's why we use here the plural, and partitive here we need because the verb rakasta requires the partitive case. So let's repeat. Rakastamme toisiamme. We love each other. Let's take another example. Amy ja Aino sanoivat toisilleen hyvää yötä. So sanoivat is the third person plural past tense of sanoa, which means to say, and toisilleen is the allative plural of toinen plus a possessive suffix. Actually, the allative plural of toinen is toisillensa, but since toisille ends in a short vowel, we can use the vowel ending here. So we technically just double the final E from toisille and then add an extra N to it. That's why we say toisilleen. By the way, why do we use the allative plural here? Because this action involves two people, so that's why we need the plural here, and because saying something to someone or to each other usually requires the allative case. So let's repeat both sentences. Rakastamme toisiamme, we love each other, or Amy ja Aino sanoivat toisilleen hyvää yötä. Amy and Aino said goodnight to each other. Now let's move on to our next chapter, postpositions and possessive suffixes. If you have already seen my video about postpositions, then you know about the rule noun in genitive case plus postpositions. However, we can also use postpositions in combinations with pronouns instead of nouns. That's when we actually need possessive suffixes then. Let's have a look at two examples. Puen mekon päälläni means I put a dress on me. So puen is the first person singular of the verb pukea, which means to put on or to dress. Mekon is the genitive case of mekko, which means dress. And päälläni is a combination of the past position päällä plus the possessive suffix ni. In English, we will translate it as on me or on myself. So let's repeat. Puen mekon päälläni. I put a dress on me. Let's have one more. Kissa istuu edessäni means the cat is sitting in front of me. So kissa means cat. Istu is the third person singular of the verb istua, which means to sit. And edeseni is a combination of the past position edessa, which means in front of, and ni is our possessive suffix. So edeseni in English can be translated as in front of me. So let's repeat. Kissa istu edeseni. The cat is sitting in front of me. Now we move on to our next big chapter, which is about the formation. How do we form possessive suffixes? So to keep it simple, I will only use the first person suffix for all examples, but know that the rules apply for all persons. So we start with rule number 1. Words ending in the vowels a, u, y, or o and ö. Let's take a look at one example. Auto, which means car. So when we want to add a possessive suffix to it, we have to follow 2 steps. The first step is to find the stem, which is also auto. And then in the second step, we have to add ni to the stem. So that means we have auto plus ni, and we get autoni, which means my car. We carry on with rule number 2, words ending in the English vowel e. For example, lentogone means airplane. So in the first step, again, we have to find the stem, which we receive by adding an extra e to the word. So that means we have lentogone plus e, and we get lentogone. This is our stem. Then in the second step, we have to add ni to the stem, which means we have lentogone plus ni, and we get lentogoneni, which means my airplane. Rule number 3, new words ending in I. For example, bussi, which means bus. Also here in the first step we have to find the stem, which is bussi. Then in the second step we add again ni to the stem, which means we have bussi plus ni is bussini, which means my bus. Alright, we carry on with rule number 4, old words ending in I. For example, talvi, which means winter. In order to find the stem, we have to replace the last letter I by E. So talvi changes to talva. Then in the second step, we have to add ni to the stem, which means we have talva plus ni, and we get talvani. Talvani, which means my winter. Next one, rule number 5, words ending in C. For example, kausi, meaning season. Again, the first step we have to find a stem, which we get when we replace si with te. So kausi changes to kaute. And then in the second step we add ni to it, so that means we have kaute plus ni, and we get kauteni, which can be translated as my season. Short notice, if you have already learned a little bit how to find a stem, then you probably wonder why we don't replace C with a DE instead, but rather with TE. This is because it works differently with possessive suffixes. Alright, we carry on. Rule number 6, words ending in. For example, tulostin. In the first step we have to find a stem, which we get when we replace in with ima. So tulostin changes to tulostima. And then in the second step, we again add ni to the stem. That means we have tulostime plus ni, and we get tulostimeni, which means my printer. We carry on. Rule number 7, words ending in nen. For example, lautanen, which means plate. In the first step, again, we have to find the stem, which we receive by replacing nen with se. So lautanen changes to lautase. This is our stem. And then in the second step, we have to add ni to the stem, which means we get lautase plus ni, and we receive lautaseni, which means my plate. Next one, rule number 8, words ending in as. For example, taivas means sky. Here, in order to find the stem, we have to replace the ending as with a double A. So taivas changes to taiva with a double A. And then in the second step, again, we add ni to the stem, which means we have taiva plus ni, and we get taivani, which can be translated as my sky. Next one, rule number 9a and 9b. Here we have 2 rules. Let's focus on rule number 9a, old nouns ending in is. For example, kauris means Capricorn. So here in the first step, again, we want to find the stem, which we receive by replacing is with a double I. So Kauris changes to Kauri. This is our stem, and then in the second step, we add as always the possessive suffix to it. So we get Kauri plus ni, and we receive Kaurini, which means my Capricorn. Pay attention that when we want to find a stem here, we have to replace is with a double I. Now, that's not always the case. Sometimes it works differently. For example, when we look at the rule 9b, which is about some old nouns and colloquial words ending in is. For example, varis, which means crow. Again, in the first step, we have to find a stem, which we get when we replace is with ixa. So varis changes to varixa. This is our stem, which means we have varixa plus ni, and we receive varixeni, which can be translated as my crow. Now let's see how it works with colloquial words ending in is. For example, filis means vibe or feeling. In the first step, again, we have to replace is with ixa, so filis changes to felixa. Then in the second step, we have to add ni, so we have felixa plus ni, and we receive felixeni, which can be translated as my vibe or my feeling. So what do we have to remember about the rules 9a and 9b? In order to find the stem of a word ending in is needs to either get replaced by a double I or by ixa, depending on the kind of the word. Alright, we carry on with rule number 10, words ending in os or ös. Laitos means, for example, institution. In the first step, again, we want to find the stem, which we get by replacing os with oxa. So laitos changes to laitoxa. Then in the second step, again, we add the possessive suffix. So that means we have laitoxa plus ni, and we receive laitoxeni. We carry on with the rules 11a and 11b, derived words from adjectives or nouns ending in us or us. For example, korkeus means height. In the first step, we have to find the stem, which we receive by replacing us with utta. So korkeus changes to korkeutta. Again, why utta and not ude here? Because we want to add a possessive suffix. Then in the second step, we add ni to the stem, which means we have korkeutta plus ni, and we receive korkeuttani, which can be translated as my height. Next one, rule number 11b, derived words from verbs ending in us or us. Here's one example. Vastaus means answer. In order to find the stem, we have to replace the us ending here with uxa. So vastaus changes to vastauxa. And then in the second step, we add ni to the stem, which means we have vastauxa plus ni, and we receive vastauxeni, which means my answer. We carry on. Rule number 12, words ending in us or us. For example, itsevarmus means self-confidence. Again, in order to find the stem, we have to replace us with utta. So itsevarmus changes to itsevarmute. And then in the second step, we have to add ni to the stem, which means we have itsevarmute plus ni, and we receive itsevarmuteni. And then we carry on with rules number 13a and 13b, words ending in ut or ut. For example, olut, which means spear. In order to find the stem of olut, we have to replace the t with an i. So that means olut changes to olue. And then in the second step, we have to add ni to the stem, which means we have olue plus ni, and we get olueni, which means my beer. And then we have rule number 13b, which is about words ending in ut or ut, but with focus on not or nut participles. For example, etsinut, which is the past active participle of etsia. Keep in mind that we only add a possessive suffix to these forms when they are used on their own as nouns. When they are used as adjectives, then they don't take any possessive suffix. Now let's take a look at how to add a possessive suffix to etsinut and similar words. In the first step, we have to replace ut with a double e, so etsinut changes to etsine. Then in the second step, we add ni, so we have etsine plus ni, and we receive etsineeni. Let's take another example, mennyt, which is the past active participle of menna, which means to go. Again, in the first step, we replace ut with a double e, so mennyt changes to menne. And then in the second step, we add ni to it. So that means we have menne plus ni, and we receive menneeni. Now we move on to our next chapter, the spoken language. So at the beginning of the video, we learned that we can say in formal Finnish, minun autoni, which means my car, or in standard Finnish, we can also just say autoni. So while we use in formal Finnish the personal pronoun in its genitive form plus a possessive suffix, in standard Finnish we just go with the possessive suffix. However, not for the third person singular and plural. Also in standard Finnish we cannot omit these two pronouns, so hänen and heidän still have to remain. Now how does it look like with the spoken version? Here we can just say minun auto, which means that in spoken Finnish we do not use the possessive suffix, instead we just go with the pronoun. Here's one important information. While it's okay in everyday situations to go with the spoken Finnish version, in a Finnish grammar test or in a Finnish language test, it's recommended to use the formal Finnish version or the standard Finnish version. Alright, now let's go quickly through all the forms. Minun autoni can be also just autoni, or we can say minun auto. Sinun autosi, autosi, sinun auto. Hänen autonsa, hänen autonsa, hänen auto. Meidän automme, automme, meidän auto. Teidän autonne, autonne, teidän auto. Heidän autonsa, heidän autonsa, heidän auto. As you see here, no matter what kind of version you use, the third person pronouns hänen and heidän never get omitted. Now there are also dialects. For example, you can say mun auto, sun auto, sen auto, meidän auto, teidän auto, and heidän auto. Now let's go through some examples. Actually, we only have 6 examples today. For every person, one example. So the first one is, eilen ostin kisalleni ruokaa ja siivous-välineitä. Means, yesterday I bought food and cleaning supplies for my cat. So, eilen means yesterday. Ostin is the first person singular past tense of the verb osta, which means to buy. Kisalleni means here for my cat. It's a combination of kissa plus le plus ni. Literally it means to my cat, but in English you would rather say for my cat. Ruoka here means food, standing here in the partitive case. Why? Because we're talking about an uncountable amount of food. Ja means and siivous-välineitä means cleaning supplies. Eilen ostin kisalleni ruokaa ja siivous-välineitä. The possessive suffix here is ni. Next one. Toimiko sinun tulostimesi jo? Can be translated as does your printer already work? So toimiko here is a combination of toimi, which is the third person singular present tense of the verb toimia, which means to function, plus the question marker ko. Sinun, your, it's a pronoun in the genitive case. Tulostimesi means your printer. It's a combination of tulostin plus the possessive suffix si. By tulostime, again, tulostime is the stem of tulostin and jo means already. Toimiko sinun tulostimesi jo? Does your printer already work? Next one. Hän juhlii syntymäpäiväänsä. He's celebrating his birthday. So hän means he or she. Juhlii is the third person singular present tense of the verb juhlia, which means to celebrate. And syntymäpäiväänsä means his birthday. So the possessive suffix here in this sentence is ensä. He or she is celebrating his birthday. Next one. Meidän vesihanamme vuotaa means our water tap is leaking. So meidän here is our pronoun in the genitive case, meaning our. Vesihanamme is a combination of vesihana, which means water tap, and me is our possessive suffix here for the first person plural. And then we have vuotaa, which means to leak. It's the third person singular present tense here of the verb vuotaa. So let's repeat. Meidän vesihanamme vuotaa. Our water tap or faucet is leaking. So the possessive suffix here is me. Next one. Minä pidän teidän pienestä kissastanne means I like your little cat. So, minä pidän means I like. It's the first person singular present tense of the verb pitää, which means to like. Teidän here is our personal pronoun in the genitive case, second person plural, which means your plural. Pienestä is the elative case of pieni. Why elative case? Because of the verb pitää. And then we have kissastanne, which is a combination of kissa, which means cat, sta, the elative marker, and ne, the possessive suffix for the second person, plural. Minä pidän teidän pienestä kissastanne. I like your little cat. Next one. Viime huhtikuussa Liisa meni naimisiin sveitsiläisen miehen kanssa ja heidän hänsä olivat Zürichissä. Means last April Lisa married a Swiss man and the wedding was in Zurich, or as we say in German, Zürich. So, viime huhtikuussa means last April. Lisa meni naimisiin means Lisa married. Mennä naimisiin means to get married. Sveitsiläisen miehen kanssa literally means with a Swiss man. So here we say sveitsiläisen miehen genitive case because of kanssa, which requires the genitive case. And ja heidän hänsä olivat Zürichissä means and the wedding was in Zurich. If you wonder why we say olivat here, it's because of the wedding. The wedding in Finnish always stands in the plural form. That's why the verb is also standing in the plural. Alright, let's repeat. Viime huhtikuussa Liisa meni naimisiin sveitsiläisen miehen kanssa ja heidän hänsä olivat Zürichissä. Last April, Lisa married a Swiss man and the wedding was in Zurich. Now we move on to our last chapter for today, the exercises and solutions. For each exercise, we have 5 seconds time to answer. So let's start with the first one. Translate into Finnish, our car and my key. How do you say that in Finnish? That's right. Our car in Finnish is meidän automme. And my key in Finnish is minun avaimeni. Alright, next one. Fill in the correct possessive suffix that matches the pronoun given in the sentence. We wanna say, my best friend lives in Japan. Minun paras ystävä asuu Japanissa. Which suffix do we need here? That's right, it's ni. Minun paras ystäväni asuu Japanissa. My best friend lives in Japan. Next one, we wanna say Miko's television is broken. Fill in the gap by choosing the correct option from below. That's right, it's Mikon televisio on rikki. Next one, we wanna say this is my old printer. Fill in the gap. Tämä on minun tulostimeni. Do we need vanha or vanhani? That's right, we need vanha here. Tämä on minun vanha tulostimeni. This is my old printer. Next one, we wanna combine a possessive suffix with a case ending. So how do you say in our school? That's correct. It's koulussamme. Koulu, which means school, gets followed by the case ending, which is sa in a sieve case, and me is our possessive suffix for the first person plural. Koulussamme in our school. Meidän koulussamme in our school. Next one. Fill in the gap by choosing the correct option from below. We wanna say, my friends are from Japan. Which option is the correct one? What do we have to fill in? That's right, it's ystäväni. Ystäväni ovat kotoisin Japanista. My friends are from Japan. Next one, fill in the gap. He only loves his cat. Hän rakastaa vain. Which option can we use here? And can we only use one or even both options? That's right, the answer is hän rakastaa vain kissaansa. Here we can only use one option. Next one, fill in the gap by choosing the correct option. Sinä kuivaat. What do we have to fill in? That's right, it's itsesi. Sinä kuivaat itsesi. You try yourself. Next one. How do you say the cat is sitting in front of me? Kissa istuu. What do we have to fill in? Hint, in front in Finnish is edessä. The answer is edessäni. Kissa istuu edessäni. The cat is sitting in front of me. And our last example for today. How do you say my car in formal Finnish, in standard Finnish, and in spoken Finnish? Formal Finnish is minun autoni, standard Finnish is autoni, and spoken Finnish is minun auto. That's it for today. I hope you liked this video. If you want to learn more Finnish, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Have a nice day and see you next time.